the DPS buff that they got this patch, it is still not very good to run it as DPS. All right, guys, we have a very important interview today. You guys have been asking to interview a Holy Knight player, right? A Paladin player. Look at this, 6 Paladins. Yeah, with the 1593 Paladin. He knows everything about Paladin. He knows everything. So we're going to have an interview with him, just like any other class interviews that we have done. And as usual in our interview content, we're gonna ask the questions later. I'm gonna keep on looking at the chat to see if there's any good questions while we're progressing. So keep the questions into Paladin wise, like the class wise. 자, 그러면은 자기소개 좀 해주세요.
MMORPG에서 힐러를 주로 플레이하고 있는 마골이라고 합니다.
His name is Magor. He usually plays support in any other MMORPGs. The same case as my boyfriend. 클래스 선택하냐고 왜 플레이하는지 좀.
약간 좀 사기를 당했어요.
He got scammed.
우리가 시작할 때 게임에 바드랑 홀리나이트밖에 없었어. 게임에 서포터가 도마가 없었잖아요. 와우의 신성기사 느낌이었거든요 처음에. 근데 아니더라고.
So when he played, so when he started the game, there was Bard and Paladin only. He thought Paladin was going to be pretty similar to the WoW Paladin, so he said he got scammed. So it's a little different. That's why he's playing Paladin still, because he got too deep into it. 클래스 추천하고 싶은 점하고 비추천.
지금 홀리나이트가 사실상 저점에서도 고점에서도 제일 좋은 서포터라고 평가를 받고 있어서 그냥 초보자가 접근하고 플레이했을 때도 되게 좋지 않을까. 사람들이 평가가 되게 좋거든요. 이게 일단 왜 좋냐면 편해요. 그러니까 신경 쓸 게 없어요. 파티원들이 피가 떨어지든 내가 공격력 증가 버프를 주던 쉴드를 주던 하는 거에 대해서 다 범위 스킬이고 하기 때문에 파티원이 알아서 케어가 된다 자동으로. 내가 크게 신경 쓰지 않아도. 그게 제일 큰 장점인 것 같아요.
Okay. So the questions was, what is the best part about Paladin, playing Paladin? And what he's saying is like the end game. The end game ceiling or the floor, the early game. It is the best. He thinks it's the best support is because what supports do is you carry the team, right? You carry the team. And within the kits that he has, it is by far the easiest class to provide heals, right? Shields and attack buffs and defense buffs, all these buffs together, right? So it is much easier to just stick around and make sure you put your skills on to provide the amount of supports that the team requires. So it is much easier to outperform. And even if you don't play well, his overwhelming easier kit covers it up for you.
도화가나 바드에 비해서 그러니까 경직 면역 스킬이랑 그다음에 피격 면역 스킬이 좀 부족해요. 그래서 바닥에 좀 잘 눕거나 날아가요. 그러니까 스킬을 사용 중에 좀 캔슬이 많이 나는 편이에요.
Non-recognition, like the disappointments for Paladin is the Paladin do lack super armor and stagger immune skills, so they tend to be on the floor a little bit more. Like floor as in not death, like lying on the floor by getting hit, right? And they get canceled. They get their buffs canceled a little bit more often than bards and artists does. So those are some of the things that are disadvantageous compared to the other supports.
그리고 딜러로서 접근해서 팔라딘을 키우고 있는 거라면 그다지 좋은 임팩트를 보여줄 수 없다. 서포터로서는 정말 훌륭한 캐릭터지만 이번에 상향을 많이 받았음에도 불구하고 메인 딜러로 쓰기에는 좀 그렇지 않나.
So what he is worried was, so what he was worried about is he notices the US players really like DPS Paladin because they have the sword and all that stuff, the Paladins, the playstyle. So even with the buff that the Paladins got, the DPS buff that they got this patch, it is still not very good to run it as DPS. So there you have it, guys. It's not good. For someone who tried. 클래스 활용하는 스킬 중 보석이나 개인적으로 스킬가 가져가는 스킬 트리 이런 거. So we're going to over skills one by one. I think it's better to teach by going over the skills one by one to figure out, because sometimes you guys are wondering which skills is used and stuff.
일단은 돌진부터 설명을 할게요.
Charge.
스킬은 이렇게 쓰는다. 보통 돌진 같은 경우는 홀리나이트 이동기로 사용을 하고 레벨을 보통 7 정도를 줘요. 7 정도를 주고 빠른 준비랑 빛의 부라는 이 스킬을 두 개 트라이포드를 이렇게 사용해서 아브 오육간 같은 약간 좀 이동기가 필요할 것 같을 때 쉴드를 받으면서 돌진으로, 그러니까 쉴드를 받으면서 케어하고 이동하는 스킬로 사용을 하거든요. 이게 옛날에는 돌진을 많이 썼는데 요새는 아덴 수급기 여기 하나 더 넣고 돌진을 안 쓰는 추세라 사용은 안 하고 있습니다.
So before those of you are wondering about charge, right? Charge is you level charge and you level up the cooldown tripod and the shield tripod. You utilize this to have another dash besides your spacebar. So to raids that require you to cover a lot of ground, paladins tend to use this to like cover more ground. But nowadays, instead of that, it changed. The meta kind of changed into adding more identity gauge gain skills to rotate the buff a little faster. So less people are using charge right now.
그다음에 처단이라는 스킬이 있는데 이 친구 같은 경우는 파티에 공대나 파티에 무력이 모자랄 때 또룬을 사용해서 무력을 좀 올려가지고 무력 스킬용으로 하나 더 쓰는 편이에요. 그러니까 이건 이제 공대가 모자르면 이게 무력화 중상 스킬을 쓰고 그다음에 여기 노드는 파티 상관없고요. 그다음에 이중 강타를 찍어서 이걸로 무력을 좀 더
Right.
줄 수 있게.
So that particular skill execution, some people do take it on certain rates when you feel that you guys are lacking stagger for the team, the whole team. By leveling up to 10 and then you get the tripod for the first one, the third level to provide extra stagger. Like sometimes some raids do require a bunch of stagger, right? And if you feel that it lacks a little bit, people tend to switch skills just one or two more. For example, a charge can be execution as well if you want to provide more. You gotta be a little bit more versatile in changing skills sometimes.
그다음에 징벌 스킬 중에 이제 메인으로 사용하는 스킬이 집행자의 검이랑 신성검인데 이 집행자의 검 같은 경우는 카운터도 할 수 있고 무력 기술이기도 하거든요. 파괴 스킬도 달려 있고 해서 스킬을 10레벨을 찍고 이게 좀 약간 갈려요. 저 같은 경우는 탁월한 기동성을 사용하고 파괴가 필요하게 되면 V 파괴 강화, 필요가 없으면 호흡 조절.
So Executor Sword is one of your main skill that you should use. As I explained on the first tripod, you actually have a choice between the three. You can probably use it whichever you want. He prefers the excellent mobility, but you can use the any other ones. As for the second tripod, you have breath control and weak point enhancement. If you want to increase your weak point ability, you use the weak point enhancement. For example, like you guys been playing Valton, right? So you can use the weak point enhancement to add additional destruction so that you can actually break Valton's armor at a much higher percentage. Because sometimes it doesn't break if other people are lacking. So you can cover some of that, and then you go for a broad slash. At the end, some of you who are wondering if I should level up to 12 or 11, most supports don't need to put their skills up to level 12. So most of the time they keep it at 10 to level up just enough for the versatility and the mechanics that is required. And also as for runes, since this is mostly used for stagger, you use the overwhelm rune.
다음 스킬은 이제 징벌 스킬 중에 신성검을 사용하는데요. 메인 스킬이에요. 팔라딘 많이 사용하는 스킬이고 저 같은 경우는 자세 잡기랑 그 다음에 빛의 분출. 이거는 공격을 찔렀을 때 그냥 공격이 나가는 투포라 무조건 써야 되고 그다음에 빛의 해방이라는 투포를 사용해요. 이거 같은 경우는 저기 바닥에 깔리는 스킬이거든요. 쓰면은 이 잔상에도 카운터 판정이 다 있기 때문에 빛의 해방을 사용하고 저 잔상에도 카운터 판정 및 무력 게이지가 다 있어요. 저게 남아 있는 거에. 그래서 팔라딘이 1인분 무력을 할 수 있게 해주는 스킬이에요. 아니 정확하게 말하면 특포예요 이게. 그래서 이렇게 찍는 게 좀 베스트가 아닌가. 룬 같은 경우는 압도를 주력으로 사용하고 무력이 딱히 필요 없는 데선 질풍 룬으로 바꿔서 사용하기도 해요.
So as for Holy Sword, as most paladins use, you have positioning and you have outburst of light. Because again, you kind of use outburst of light because if you fail, you get to emit the light even if you fail, right? So and as for the third tripod, as he says, the additional particles that emits from the Holy Sword is also counted as a stagger and also it counted as a counter, as he said. So most of the time, most paladins definitely go for 112 to do one thing, to do a lot of stagger and to counter at the long distance and just to keep it, right? And because of this, you have Overwhelm Rune, but if you don't think you don't need that much stagger, you kind of put Galewind Rune as well. It's much bigger hitbox. It's a really good counter. It's a little slower to actually activate it, but if the enemy is going to counter, you can just press it to hopefully it lands. But most of the time it lands as well, because all the ticks that the particle emits is counted as a counter.
그다음에 네, 신성 스킬 중에 빛의 충격. 이 친구 같은 경우는 보통은 강력한 충격을 찍거나 7레벨만 찍어서 낙인용으로 많이 사용을 해요. 룬 같은 경우는 얘를 쓰면은 속행을 달아서 쓰거든요. 빛의 충격 쿨타임이 짧아서 속행으로 전체 쿨타임을 줄이는 용으로 많이 써요. 쿨이 엄청 짧기 때문에 기본 쿨이 8초라서 지금 제 기준으로 4초가 나오거든요. 낙인이 6초인데 쿨이 4초예요. 내가 낙인 스킬을 그 파티 사냥에서 제일 중요한 게 이거 지금 파티 증댐이잖아요. 낙인을 찍어야 되는데 낙인이 삑이 났어. 실패를 했어. 그러더라도 다음 낙인 스킬 쿨까지 굉장히 짧기 때문에 리스크가 적어요. 낙인 유지를 굉장히 잘할 수 있어요. 파티 딜을 좀 잘 유지해줄 수 있다.
Okay, so going over the yellow skills, Light Shock, some people put it to level 7 just for the marking. And if I give you guys a little bit of additional explanation about marking is, so when you're playing a support class, your ability depends how well you mark the target. When you mark the target, everyone, including you, well, since you're a support, doesn't really matter as much, but everyone in the party will do 10% more damage. What does that mean? If you don't mark the target, the time that is not marked the target, every damage you do is 10% less. That is actually bigger than you think when a support is not able to mark the target as much as they can. But as you notice here, when he put it up to level 7, you got to keep it, got the uptime, right? So the uptime of this is only 8 seconds. The cooldown is only 8 seconds. And since he has a full swiftness, the skill's cooldown is only 4. And since the cooldown is much faster, you use something like a quick recharge rune to rotate the skill as much as they can to decrease the cooldown of every other skill. So this is what most people do when they kind of use it as marking. And since Paladin has more marking skills, you have something like a Light Shock to make sure that you have the mark up 100% of the time. And more that you have it up, everyone will do more damage.
그다음에 심판의 빛이라는 스킬은 제가 돌진 대신에 빼고 쓰는 스킬인데 아덴 획득용으로 써요. 이제 그래서 풍요룬을 전설 풍요룬을 사용을 하고요. 이 아덴 수급이 중요한 직업이다 보니까 쿨이 짧고 아덴 수급량이 굉장히 크거든요. 얘가 폰을 이렇게 사용하는 편입니다. 아덴 수급기예요. 별로 큰 의미가 있진 않고 경직 면역이 있어서 경직 면역이 필요할 때 사용할 수는 있는데 모션이
정의
너무
말고 옆에 건 써요. 그 세 번째 거.
아 이거 쓰긴 쓰는데 얘랑 아덴 수급량이 별로 차이가 안 나요. 이게 이 도트로 이렇게 쓰긴 쓰거든요. 근데 이게 홀딩기로 바뀌어버려서 이게 안 좋지. 왜냐면 홀딩기라는 거 자체가 얘 팔라딘 안 그래도 경면이랑 피면이 없어서 굴러다니는데 홀딩으로 다 뿜어내기가 좀 힘들거든요.
So I've been playing mine wrong. My Paladin wrong, which is good because you guys will learn too. So Light of Judgment, he uses this to gather identity gauge, right? You can use this instead of charge, the charge skill that we have went over. So you have Swift Fingers and you have Faith for additional identity gauge gain. And for Righteous Light and Sustain Enhancement, I use Sustain Enhancement because I thought it was going to give more, but apparently it's about the same. You don't have much of a super armor, so you got to get hit most of the time. So if you're using something like Sustain Enhancement, you're going to stay in place for a while, right? So the problem is you stay for a while and then you get hit and then you tend to get knocked off and all that stuff. It is actually important for them to be just quick, walk around, quick charge, etc. Right? He tends to use the Righteous Light, and I've been using the other one, so I'm probably gonna have to switch.
낙인 스킬이 좀 얘한테 여러 개가 있어요. 정의의 검 같은 경우는 제가 사용하는 낙인 스킬인데 찰력, 그 다음에 낙인, 그 다음에 눈부심 검, 그 다음에 단죄를 저는 여기에 사용하고 있거든요. 이 친구 같은 경우는 빛의 충격에 비해서 스킬 쿨타임이 얘는 이제 8초인데 얘는 15초잖아요. 스킬 쿨이 좀 길어요. 그래서 통찰력 투포를 반드시 작업을 해야 좀 수월하게 사용할 수 있고 단죄를 터트리기 용이해요. 설치형이라서 보면은 내가 원하는 위치에 떨어뜨리면 그 자리에 계속 이렇게 낙인이 찍히거든요. 낙인 시간도 계속 갱신이 돼요. 저 시간만큼. 그리고 통찰력이라는 걸 사용하면 제 사용 시간이 감소하기 때문에 빛의 충격보다는 못하지만 리스크도 좀 줄일 수 있어요. 삑 났을 때.
Look at this. I actually never used this. So Sword of Justice is also another marking skill, right? Marking skill is important, right, guys? So this marking skill is 15 seconds. But if you level up Insight, it decreases by 3.5 seconds, so it's even lower. And at the same time, it gives you 10 seconds of marking, right? What marking is, again, 10% more damage to the party, right? So you have the Insight, you have the Summon Holy Sword, which is the marking skill, and then you have Dazzling Light Sword. And what Dazzling That Sword is for 3 seconds, the sword is going to fall down. What does that mean? Since you keep hitting him, it is super easy to activate your Conviction Rune. And your Conviction Rune is going to be resetted every time you successfully land the Conviction Rune. So what he does is, since it's far, you can cast it far away. You cast it, the swords keep landing. Your Conviction Rune is keep recycling the timing, and your marking is also recycling the timing. So you can either activate your Judgment afterwards, or you can keep on doing your marking skills afterwards with a different skill, like Light Shock or etc. Marking doesn't stack, but the timing does reset. As in, like, the timing just goes longer. So what the important thing is, when you keep on leaving your marking, you gotta make sure the uptime is 100% of the time. It should not get turned off, because imagine marking is turned off and your friend is doing like an awakening skill, right? You lose 10% of that damage. A support's job is to make sure the DPS does the maximum amount of damage with the ability that you have. That defines the best support and the bad ones.
율법 세이브 스킬인데
난 이거 쓰는데, 각인으로.
어떤 거?
그 낙인으로 율법 쓰는데.
낙인으로 율법 써요? 아 이거 좀 취향차가 좀 있어요. 이게 빛의 충격 쓰는 사람도 있고 정의의 검도 있고. 그래서 제가 쓰는 걸 설명하려다가 다들 쓰는 거 하나씩 좀 읊어주는. 이거 신성폭발 쓰는 사람도 있어요. 낙인으로.
Yeah, so he's saying that everyone uses it differently, so you have to find your own thing, because I realize he plays different than I do. So you can, that's pretty exciting, right? Because like Paladin is played differently by everyone. It's by preferences too. So you have to find your own. So instead, this interview, what he's going to cover is what everyone uses, so that you guys can choose afterwards.
저 같은 경우는 낙인으로 안 쓰고 이렇게 쓰는 편이에요. 보호막, 넓은 공격, 가호. 그러니까 가호 같은 경우는 파티원 케어용, 그 다음에 넓은 공격은 이제 넓은 범위에 당연히 케어를 해야 되니까. 보호막 같은 경우는 이제 이게 내 체력 기반으로 쉴드를 씌워주는 거라서. 아까 이제 정의의 검이랑 이제 단제를 여기다 달았잖아요. 그래서 이제 단제랑 그 약간 연계해가지고 얘가 단제가 터졌을 때 심판이 터지면 이런 식으로 쉴드를 그냥 덮어주는 용도로, 슈퍼 세이브용으로 가지고 있는 게 아니라 자주자주 사용하는 용도로 쓰고 있거든요. 저 같은 경우는 낙인을 얘로 써버리면 얘를 좀 제 맘대로 못 쓰더라고요. 그 하별 딜러들이랄지 이런 친구들을 케어하기가 좀 힘들다고 생각을 해가지고 저 같은 경우는 좀 넓은 공격을 사용. 그래서 이거는 바닥에 잠깐 닿기만 해도 댐감이 데미지 감소가 들어가기 때문에 흔히 말하는 서포터들의 슈퍼 세이브용으로 가지고 있을 수도 있지만, 요새 율법은 약간 이제 이 보호막을 좀 주력으로 사용하는 것 같아요. 신성한 보호가 쿨일 때 아군의 케어가 좀 필요하면 그냥 율법으로 쉴드를 씌워주는 느낌? 이렇게 체력을 늘려주는. 그래서 맞는 데미지를 쉴드로 케어해주고, 댐감은 그냥 보너스. 물론 이제 좀 멋있어 보이고 싶으면은 좀 위험한 기믹에 율법 같은 거 써주면서 발탄이나 비아키스 같은데 큰 기믹들 있잖아요. 그럴 때 이제 데미지 감소로 살려주는 방법도 있긴 하지만
like super
사람들이
saves.
알아주지 못해.
So interesting opinions he has shared that I didn't know, but I think this interview is really good because it will give you some insights to a lot of things. So as for tripods, you have the shield, and then the brilliant law is their marking skill, right? But he uses the wide angle attack. Also, the grace is obviously what you use as a support. It's a super save, isn't it? It's like the same thing as the Rhapsody of Light, where if this thing is casted, it decreases 70% of the damage intake. So you kind of use that before anyone gets hit, right? So it's like a super save kind of style. So since the skill cool is there, but when he used it as a marking skill, it's kind of limited, as in like he needs to control like this kind of when to use the skill. But instead, what he usually does, or what most people do, is again, you have the Sword of Justice as conviction, and then you have Gossip Laws as judgment, right? So he uses the Sword of Justice, put the conviction rune, and uses the Gossip Law to activate the judgment. And at the same time, since he has the shield tripod, it just gives an additional shield for 6 seconds as much as they can. So with the lack of shield that paladins do have, he adds it on top of it. Does that make sense? I think this makes sense. So basically, because they do lack a little shield abilities compared to artists and bards. So the more often you put the shield on, that's also heal too. Because imagine if you get hit while you have a shield on, that's technically healing them, because your HP is not falling down because you get shielded all the time. So he uses this to activate the runes and making sure to save them instead of marking. I use them as marking, so it's a little bit different playstyle.
얘네를 삼신기라 그러는데 또 신의 분노 같은 경우는 이제 공증 스킬이거든요. 파티 공격력 버프 스킬이라서 공격력 버프 스킬이자 그 다음에 아덴 수급기여가지고 투포는 거의 이렇게 고정이고요. 거의 강인한 경우를 찍는 분이 있긴 하더라고요. 레이드에서도 캔슬이 많이 나서 이게
맞아.
공중인데 캔슬이 많이 나서 아덴을 조금 포기를 하고 강인함 찍는 분들이 있긴 한데 사실 좀 연습하면은 해결되는 부분이라 저는 추천하고 싶진 않아요. 좀 잠깐 좀 보고 왔거든요. 그래서 이 친구 같은 경우는 저는 이제 풍요룬, 영웅 풍요룬을 사용해서 사용하는 편이고 공격력 버프 스킬이기 때문에 취소가 되지 않게, 그러니까 캔슬하지 않게 좀 안전한 범위 내에서 적을 맞추면서 아군에게 버프를 주는 그런 걸로 좀 사용을 해야 돼요.
Right. So as for Wrath of God, one of your main buff skills, right? The main 3 buff skills. You have the white Thunderstroke. And you have a choice between Faith and Tenacity, which I'll talk about later. And you have the Express Free, which is your buff attack, right? For 8 seconds, you have 15% attack damage, and an additional another 6%. So this is your main buff skill. So going back to the second tripod, you have option between Tenacity and Faith. Most people put Faith because you gotta get more identity gain, right? So as you are buffing your friends, and landing the skill on the enemy to fill up your gauge. He said that some people use Tenacity because they don't want this to be canceled. But as he said, these are things that can be practiced to make sure that you don't get hit while you're using this buff. I mean, it makes sense, because the more you play, the more you master the class, you get hit less, right? So instead of going for the Tenacity to make sure you land the buff 100% of the time, maybe practice to dodge and then land the skill and also gain additional identity gauge. So it is really up to you guys, but I think he suggests something like it's better to gain identity gauge more. So it's better to use the second tripod instead, the face tripod. I think most people have done that too.
신성 지역 같은 경우는 이제 율법이 상향이 되면서 좀 많이 죽은 스킬인데 파괴 셋이라는 이제 파괴 장비? 파괴 셋을 사용할 때 쓰긴 써요. 그래서 보통 쓰게 되면 이런 식으로. 그리고 아덴 수급량이 굉장히 좋기 때문에 이 친구 같은 경우도 풍요룬을 사용하면 좋고요. 얘랑 버프가 중복이 안 되거든요. 여기도 데미지 감소 옵션이 있는데 가호에 얘랑 중복이 안 돼요. 그래서 같이 사용하면은 별로 좋지 않아요. 이 친구 같은 경우는 이제 설치형 스킬이라서 이렇게 뿌려두면은 이제 이 지역에 있는 아군에게 케어가 되고, 그다음에 아덴 수급력도 굉장히 좋은 편이거든요, 스킬이. 근데 실질적으로 요새는 좀 잘 안 쓰이는 추세긴 해요.
So Holy Area is a skill that is not being as used often because the Godsent Law was recently buffed a little bit. So you go Quick Prep and Grace and Endless Grace, which is a large AoE area. This is one of the better identity gauge gain skills. However, the Godsent Law's defense buff and Holy Area defense buff does not stack, as he said. So you don't use both of them together, basically, because they don't stack. If it did, maybe it would have been a different case. But these days, they're using Holy Area a little bit less. But the advantage of using a Holy Area is it gives you a lot of identity gauge. It gives you a large area where your party mates can be defended with the defense buff. Other than that, it's being used less in the current meta right now.
이거 정말 좋은 스킬인데 정말 안 좋은 스킬이에요. 이게 좀 아이러니한 게
Very good but very bad skill.
하나에 다 있어. 이거 하나에 다 있어서 이게 쉴드이자 힐이자 그 클린즈 정화까지 있는 스킬이거든요. 또 마음대로 쓰기가 좀 애매해요 이게.
Ultimate skill.
이동 속도 증가 옵션을 많이 놓고 쓰고요. 그다음에 정화에 이제 빛의 서약. 보통 정화나 효과 유지를 많이 씁니다. 근데 정말 많이 힘들 때는 저도 보호막 강화 이거 좀 써보고 있긴 한데 이것도 이게 여기 두 번째는 다 괜찮거든요. 그래서 정화가 필요한데 정화를 쓰고 효과 유지나 보호 강화 같은 경우 다 괜찮다. 마나 소비가 좀 크기 때문에 보통 질풍 룬을 많이 박아서 쓰고요. 저 같은 경우는 저는 여기에 그냥 질풍 달았어요. 왜냐면
Galewind.
얘도 경면이 없어서 얘도 경면이랑 피면이 없기 때문에 보호막을 들다가 캔슬하는 경우가 많아요. 근데 이게 뭐 엄청 체감될 정도로 줄어들진 않지만은 이게 모션이 조금 간결해지기 때문에 질풍을 꽂으면
So holy protection is one of the best skills in the game and actually very annoying at the same time, as I said. And I kind of agree when you guys use holy protection as well, because it's pretty funny. If you have the quick pace tripod, the second tripod you can pretty much use anything. You can use the second one, the third one, or the first one for cleanse. And when you see the Vow of Light, though, it increases the skill by 10 seconds. So what the problem is, you kind of don't know when to use holy protection sometimes, because when you use it, like maybe you want to rotate as much as you can. It does give you everything, but the cooldown is so long, and sometimes when you use it, it's kind of useless, right? So at the same time, it's a skill you have to use, but like it just feels so weird about it. That's what he was talking about. And at the same time, he gives like Gilwin Rune because this is one of the skill that you try to use. You try to cast it, and then you get hit You get hit by this one small pattern, and then it gets canceled. So since you don't want that to happen, you tend to use Gilwin Rune to have the faster cast speed to make sure that you can actually utilize the skill as much as you can.
약간 이제 이단들 일성포말을 낙인으로 진짜로 낙인으로 쓰는 친구들이 있는데 근데 이 친구 같은 경우는 보통 이제 노드를 이렇게 줍니다. 왜냐면 얘도 질풍 땡겨가지고 이렇게 쓰더라고요. 그래서 이제 얘를 낙인으로 이렇게 사용하는 친구들이 있다. 얘의 장점 같은 경우는 근데 이게 이제 낙인 시간이 엄청 길어요. 12초고 그다음에 설치형이고 무력이 엄청 좋아요. 얘가 무력화 중짜리라서 스킬이
stagger.
그래서 제대로만 맞추면은 그 무력 스킬에 도움을 줄 수 있고 낙인도 이제 갱신이 되기 때문에 꽤나 뭐 유지는 할 수 있다. 근데 풀이 워낙 길어서 실패를 하게 되면 그 다음 낙인 찍을 때까지 기다리는 시간이 너무 기니까 저는 개인적으로 좀 선호하진 않아요. 근데 사용하는 친구들이 있습니다.
2단이라니까 개웃기네. So
사파야.
So the holy explosion, right? Not many people use it, but apparently some people do use it, and we call that the cult users. And the reason why is because it does damage and has long marking, right? So you go swift fingers, and then you go marking, and then you have the explosion aftermath. Therefore, since this does decent amount of damage and has a huge explosion and have a long marking. Some paladins do use it for funsies and adding the Gale Rune on top of it too. But he doesn't recommend it, but he has seen paladins do use it because people that kind of they want to add some damages in and they want some huge explosions. So he called them kind of like a cult, a hybrid cults. he has a different religion.
뭐 말은 사파라고 했는데 근데 취향이니까.
취향이잖아. 근데 웃기잖아. That's funny. That's why it's really good because you have so many different styles.
홀리나이트 이제 스킬 세 개를 꼽으라면 3개 중에 하나 들어간 삼신기 중에 마지막이거든요. 이제 천상의 축복이라고. 이 친구 같은 경우 나댄기가 굉장히 중요하고 그다음에 공격력 버프를 가져가고 마나 회복 스킬까지 해서 보통은 이렇게 사용하고요. 저는 이제 또 얘도 풍요룬을 사용하고 있습니다.
So as for the last skill, the Heavenly Blessings, the best one, right? You have the Faith to increase your identity gauge, and then you have the attack buff on the second tripod, the third one, and then you have the Absolute Blessing to give additional mana recovery, which is very important for the party too. Yep. So there's really not much to explain about this particular thing because this is one of the most important skill. This plus Wrath of God and Holy Protection, those 3 skills are the mandatory skills that most paladins take. Yep.
네, 그리고 이제 각성기는 이거는 뭐 선택의 여지가 없기 때문에
Awakening has no choice other than
무조건 이제 이각성이라고 하거든요.
The Judgment.
알리사노스의 심판 이걸 사용하는데 이 친구 같은 경우는 이제 이게 쉴드 스킬인데
This is a shield skill? The shield of
적을 맞추지 못하면 쉴드만 생겨요. 아덴이 안 차거든요.
그렇지.
네.
If you don't land your awakening to the enemy, your identity gauge doesn't fill up.
친구 같은
I'm pretty
경우는
sure most people know this already, but
적에게 같이 맞춰야지만 의미가 있습니다.
apparently some people actually don't know this.
플라딘의 이제
You have to land the
좀
skill.
치명적인 단점인데
Uh,
이따가 할 건데 거지 같아요 이것도.
it's a disadvantage of a paladin as well. I know too. 왜 너무 잘 알고 있대요.
이게 패치 전에는 아군도 맞췄어야 됐어요. 아군도 맞추고 적도 같이 맞췄어야 됐어요.
For example, hey, before a long time ago, that awakening you had to land your awakening on the ally and the boss. By the way, so it's a huge change. It used to land both. You had to land both. Not long time ago.
근데 궁 쓴다고 핑 써도 사람들이 안 와. 안 저기 수제들을 못 받아 그래서 거지 같은 스킬이었어.
So you had to ping the area that like I'm gonna use my ult. So he's
네.
going to share his personal builds that he takes most of the time. The stuff that you've been waiting for, guys. But as you guys may notice, it's very preference based. So you have to find your own combination of skills. And now he's going to explain how some of the playstyles he's going to do.
이 하나의 스킬로 적에게 데미지를 더 줄 수 있고 아군에겐 케어를 부여해 줄 수 있는 거잖아요. 그러니까 이걸 그 누구보다 빠르게 계속 켜줘서 유지를 해줘야 되거든요. 그러다 보니까 이제 풍요룬을 많이 쓰고 아덴 수급기에 좀 신경을 쓰는 편이에요. 그로 인해서 이어지는 게 이 단죄 심판. 이번에 너프당해서 이제 고변산으로 바뀌기도 했지만 단죄 심판을 이용해서 단죄가 터졌을 때 심판을 터트리고 심판이 터졌을 때 각성기를 사용하면은 여기 있는 각인 중에 이제 만화의 흐름이랑 해가지고 쿨타임이 1분 아래로 떨어진단 말이에요. 각성기의 쿨타임이. 그래서 이걸로 아덴을 좀 빠르게 수급해서 축복의 오라를 한 그 레이드에서 좀 되게 많이 킬 수 있게 빈도수를 늘리기 위해서 사용하는 이제 그냥 제가 주로 사용하는 스킬트리.
Holy shit! Look how fast he filled it up.
적과 조우시 신의 본능을 먼저 켜주고 공증 버프를 유지하면서 낙인을 찍어주고 버프가 끝나갈 때쯤에 다시 한번 공격력 증가 버프를 켜주고 또 낙인 찍어주고 이거의 반복이에요. 이게 끝나갈 때쯤에 버프를 다시 켜줘서 이게 공격력 버프가 끊기지 않게 유지해주는 거.
Okay.
파티 공격력 버프가 끊기지 않게. 나머지는 이제 케어용 스킬이기 때문에 뭐 편할 때 그냥 쓰면 되는 거고 얘는 순수하게 아덴 수급용입니다. 순수하게 아덴 모으는 용으로만 쓰지 뭐 특별하게 데미지를 더 주거나 그런 스킬이 아니에요.
There's a lot to translate. 번역할 게 많네.
어렵지.
Okay, let's go from the top, okay? After I heard everything. So, when you guys play Paladin, what is the most important thing to do? Is to turn on your identity gauge, right? And Blessed Aura at level 3, it gives you the damage. It does damage received minus 20%, and it heals you. And also it gives you 10% damage boost increase, right? What does that mean? If you have a Paladin during your Valton fight, if you have a Paladin that can activate this identity, this Holy Blessing, Holy Aura, 5 times, it's way better than someone that can activate it 3 times. So Paladin's job is to activate this buff as much as they can, as fast as they can, correct? So his tweak is based on, okay, so if he has this number of skills, what are my identity gauge gain skills? What are my cooldowns and what are my other things? So basically when he starts with the so for example what he believes in what Paladin should do, right? What Paladin should do is he should always have his blessed aura up like almost as fast as they can, because like the more blessed aura you have, the more heals you can do and then more damage buffs you can. I totally agree with this, because like the more you have it up, like the more important the actual supporting that can be done. So when the fight starts, he activates Conviction and Judgment rune first, and then if he uses the awakening cooldown is only about a minute. Yeah, it's about a minute, because it goes down to 57 seconds right now. And this is because he has the full stack of Magic Stream. He activates Conviction Judgment, and then he uses Awakening, fill up the whole bar, and then he activates Blessed Aura immediately. That's when the DPS is going to do full damage, like full boost of DPS, all that stuff. And also he has the marking available. So within that time, what he's going to do, he's going to rotate the 2 buffs, which is the Wrath of God and Heavenly Blessings. and then keep rotating Sword of Justice and anything else that is needed to keep the mark skills up. Right?
가능하면은 궁극기는 이제 자주 쓰는 것도 좋긴 하지만 큰 기믹이 있을 때, 그러니까 큰 데미지가 들어올 때 아군을 케어해주는 용도로 사용하면 좋고, 이게 이렇게 아덴을 채워가지고 추구를 키게 됐으면 신성한 보호랑 율법을 좀 적극적으로 사용해가지고 아군의 피를 안 닳게 해주는 게 좀 좋아요. 그러니까 각성기를 아덴 수급용으로 사용을 했으면.
So if you have used your awakening to gain a bunch of identity gauge for the push, for the damage buff push, you would need to utilize your Godsent Law and your Holy Protection properly to make sure your party mates don't lose a lot of HP. For example, if a boss is doing a huge pattern, for example, for you guys, like when a Valton is going to do like a very annoying pattern, it is good to save your awakening for that, because people are going to die less if you actually give them a bunch of shields, because they don't die when a certain patterns that come in. So since awakenings are kind of utilized in that situation, if you use it in an identity gauge gain, you will need to try to use Godsent Laws and Holy Protection to make sure that your party mates are not going to die in a worse spot. 그리고요.
그다음에 아까 아덴 수급이 중요하다고 했는데, 이 친구 같은 경우는 아이덴티티가 켜져 있으면, 그러니까 축복의 오라가 켜져 있으면 아덴이 수급이 안 돼요, 아이덴티티가. 그래서 이런 스킬을 굳이 낭비할 필요가 없어요. 그냥 쓸 필요가 없어요, 이거 유지되는 동안에는.
So a little tip is when you turn on your blessed aura, right? You don't gain any identity. You don't gain any identity gauge. So something like Light of Judgment that he uses, he doesn't need to use it when the blessed aura is turned on, because it doesn't give you additional identity gauge gain anyway. So wasting those cooldown is not very good.
그래서 이 스킬 트리를 사용하기 위해서 보석은 현재 10레벨 없긴 한데.
That level 10s.
랩이 요새 게임을 안 해가지고. 제가 중요한 거는 이 세 개의 보석은 필요가 없다는 거예요. 여기 세 칸이 비어요. 원래 멸화를 꼽긴 하는데 멸화를 꽂아도 뭐 서포터의 딜이 워낙 무려서 여기 스킬 창에 있는 친구들 홍염의 보석만 사용하면 되거든요. 쿨타임 감소해주는 보석들만.
Right. I mean, all supports equip all cooldown gems.
그리고 이제 아까 여기 들어가 있던 보석 같은 경우는 사실 구색용, 그냥 나 보석 다 꼈어, 파티 꼈어 이런 느낌이고, 이제 굳이 의미를 부여하자면 이제 보시면 아까 제가 사용할 수 있을 것 같다는 스킬들 있잖아요. 수합해서 쓴다는 거. 돌진이나 처단이나 신성지역. 그러니까 꽂아놓은 거예요. 그냥 이제 바꿔서 사용할 수 있을 때 굳이 보석을 찾아서 꽂지 않고 그냥 쓰려고 처단이나
비슷하네.
그냥 꽂아놓은 느낌.
Right, so the other additional cooldown gems are if he switches skills. Like, you notice he has charge here, and he also has punishment here, and he also has holy aura here. Like he just has the gems there so that he can switch back and forth.
보석 같은 경우는 레벨을 먼저 높이려면 우선순위를 천상의 축복에 주고 이게 쿨이 길거든요. 그 다음에 여유가 되면 신성한 보호를 좀 신경 써서 요거 3개 정도만 맞추면 뭐 나머지는 특성
Let's
같은
go over the
경우는
combat
이제
stats.
보통 극신이라 그러잖아요. 이제 신속을 제일 많이 당겨서 쓰는데 이유는 되게 단순해요. 얘가 가지고 있는 스킬 쿨타임이 너무 길어서 신성한 보호 같은 경우는 저 마지막에 있는 힐 트포를 사용하게 되면 10초가 더 늘어나거든요. 그래서 40초짜리 스킬이에요. 그래서 이제 이 공격력 증가 버프도 아까 말씀하신 로테이션을 맞추기 위해서 쿨타임 감소가 많이 필요하고, 신성한 보호라는 스킬이 케어 스킬이기 때문에 얘도 잦은 케어를 하기 위해서 쿨타임이 많이 필요하다 보니까 신속을 좀 많이 땡겨다 쓰고, 그 다음에 아덴 수급량이 좀 필요하니 특화, 신특을 많이 씁니다. 주로 이제 뭐 약간의 밸런스 조절을 한다고 신속을 좀 빼고 특화를 올리는 경우도 있긴 한데, 저도 한번 그렇게 갔다 왔었는데 제가 생각했을 때는 그냥 신속을 더 땡길 수 있으면 땡기는 게 더 좋은 것 같아요. 신속을 최대한 많이 챙길 수 있으면 챙기는 게 좋다.
He has more swiftness than the one that gives injection. What a giga Chad. He has more.
나 이거 돌진 따라나가지고 스페이스바 쓰면은 1889 되거든요.
It goes even higher because if he uses spacebar, it goes even higher. 어떤 거요? 돌진? Yeah, because this bracelet, it gives you 65 additional swiftness if you use a spacebar.
그래서 저 같은 경우는 아까 이제 극한의 이득 챙기려면 이거 한
어,
다음에
어.
스페이스바까지 쓰고 써요.
Oh, look at that. Wow, his awakening's 1 minute straight up. Because he uses a space for the additional swiftness. That's
신속이 높으면
crazy.
좋더라고.
That's crazy, man. The strongest holy I've ever seen. So, as if continuing what he has said for the combat stats, Paladin, you always go max swiftness. Like, only your necklace is the spec and everything else on swiftness. The reason why is because all of Paladin's skills are long cooldown. For example, the Holy Protection, with the last tripod, the cooldown is 40 seconds. That is too big. So you have to go full swiftness. You have to. Because if you don't rotate your skills as a support, you wouldn't be doing your job because there's gotta be a slower upkeep. 근데
네.
그 극특은 어떻게 되는 거예요?
극특은 제가 극특으로는 쓰진 않았는데
음.
근데 극특은 말 그대로 이제 아덴 수급량을 늘려서
항상 물어보는데.
그리고 여기 그 피해 증가 옵션이 같이 늘어나요. 특화가 늘어나면.
어.
그래서 이제 그렇게 사용을 하겠다. 효과가 지금 49.84%잖아요. 그러니까 저거를 이제 거의 2배까지 늘리겠다 소리거든요. 특화를 땡기는 게. 별로 추천하고 싶지는 않은데.
So he says, the effectiveness of blessed aura at high spec increases, like it increases by, instead of 49.84, it goes about 150%, I think, the effectiveness of blessed aura. So it does increase the identity gain a little bit, but I think he paused a little bit and said that I don't think that's good.
예.
So he's gonna show it to you, I think.
이거 바꿔보면 될 것 같은데 이렇게
Oh, there you go. 162%.
1.6 더, 그러니까 한 1.5배 정도 더 올라가네요. 1800 하면.
So okay, so since he swapped over,
처음이에요 이거. 신부
yeah,
25자.
25 seconds for a shield. Are you gonna wait 25 seconds for a shield?
공증 사이클 안 맞아요 이러면. 얘가
and then the
10회
cycle, yeah, and then the attack buff cycle doesn't match. You have to wait 21 seconds.
버프 끝나도 안 돌아오는데?
It's not coming back. Love this stuff.
나는 이거 답답해서 못해.
Yeah, it says he's never gonna play it this way. Never. To give you guys a conclusion, don't go full spec. Always full swiftness.
한두 개 정도는 나쁘지 않은 것 같은데 그거는 이제 고레벨 홍연 보석이 있었을 때.
So you guys can go like 1 or 2 rings for spec if you want, but you need a high level cooldown gem to cover that lack of cooldown.
많이 땡기면 땡길수록 이득이 클 수밖에 없어요. 스킬 재사용되기 시간에는. 그러니까 사실 반지에서 특화를 챙기는 것도 손해인 거지. 저도 그거를 그렇게 생각을 했었거든요. 게임 처음 배웠을 때 그냥 신속 더 많이 땡기는 게 이득이 커. 케어적인 부분이든 공격력 증가 유지를 하는 부분이든.
So this is a really good example that he said because he actually tried it himself. So for example, there are some people saying, hey, if you get level 10 gem, a cooldown gem, you get additional cooldown, right? So why don't you switch over one accessory to spec to increase the efficiency just a little bit more? And then he agreed to that, right? Like oh yeah. Like I mean, it could work out. So he tried out having a little bit like 1600 swiftness and put a little bit more on spec to see if it's good or not. However, when he actually tried out the build, and then when he was actually rotating some skills and all that stuff, he realized since Paladin just had so much high cooldown to a point that it was actually better for him to have the high swiftness and have the high level gem, because when you're in a battle, right, sometimes you can't rotate skills, right? Sometimes you can't rotate skills and because of certain situation. So since you're always ready to rotate your skills, it tends to be more balanced, like way more balanced and stuff. So it is infinitely better to just have as many swiftness as possible. If anyone is thinking about Spec Paladin, don't do it. I don't recommend it.
하긴 얘기하면
Let's go talk about engravings now.
거의 패키지예요. 서포터
어.
패키지.
Supporter
직업
package.
직업 각인 하나에 전문의 하나, 각성 하나. 사실 이것만
어.
있으면은 얘는 다 있는 거예요.
Right. So if Paladin has Awakening, Class Engraving, and Expert, you're done. This is basically done.
이거를 각성 축복의 오라 전문의는 이제 패키지로 해가지고 이 세 개는 기본적으로 깔고 가는 거고 도화가나 바드 같은 경우는 이제 캐릭터가 이렇게 튼튼하진 않잖아요.
음.
근데 팔라딘은 이제 전사형 캐릭터여서 그
음.
친구들에 비하면은 굉장히 튼튼한 편이거든요. 굳이 중갑을 사용하진 않아도 되긴 하는데 일단 많은 사람들이 쓰는 걸 기준으로 할게요. 로아와 기준으로. 중갑 착용에 구슬 동자 이렇게 쓰거나 급타를 쓰는데 이거 좀 갈려요. 요새 추세는 좀 급타인 것 같긴 해요. 그래서 보통은 이렇게 가거든요. 뭐 레이드 하면서 밥 먹어도 안 죽을 거야. 막 이거 끼면. 중갑 착용을 쓰게 되면은 북미 친구들이 하나 좀 알아두면 좋은 게 이 옵션이 페널티 옵션이 아니게 돼요. 디버프가 들어가도 중갑을 사용하면은 디버프가 페널티가 아니게 되기 때문에 악셀을 좀 더 조금 편하게 맞출 수 있죠. 저 같은 경우는 중갑을 아예 빼죠. 빼서
음.
급타 구동을 사용하는 방법도 있고
그쵸.
이렇게 이게 이제 거의 베이직하죠. 홀리나이트의 거의 그러니까 중갑 빼면 이렇게 이 트리가 지금 가장 완벽한 빌드가 아닌가라는 얘기가 나오는데 여기서 이제 하나 알아둘 건 이렇게 쓰게 됐을 때는 공격력 감소 옵션이 페널티가 아니게 돼요. 그러니까 아까 그 중갑 썼을 때도 그렇고 얘는 공격력 감소 옵션을 안 받는 게 자기 공격력이라는 게 안 깎이거든요 이게. 그래서 버프에 영향이 없어 이 공격력 감소가. 신성검 데미지가 조금 낮아질 뿐이야. 근데 그 데미지는 레이드에 도움이 안 되기 때문에 디버프가 들어가도 상관은 없다.
Talking from the very top, when he talked about heavy armor as a joke, people do take heavy armor sometimes. But if you take heavy armor, what happens is you can actually do a raid while eating. That's how tanky he's going to get. He's just not going to die straight up. So you don't even need any pots or anything like that. So if you actually want to play that easily, you can actually do that. And go for like a heavy armor plus like drops of ether. You also have a choice of vital point, right? Vital point's always good on the support because sometimes it's really good to, help out on a stagger, help out on stagger to make sure the stagger mechanic is done, all that stuff, right? So in this particular situation, you have drops of ether and vital point, and with the three support, this three support package is mandatory, guys, right? And then you just add two on top of it, whichever the way you want. So in this particular set is possibly the most perfect build possible. And also at the same time, if you have heavy armor, the negative defense penalty is not a penalty anymore. Apparently it just negates itself out. And at the same time, the attack damage penalty does not affect you either because the buff does not impact your attack power. So it doesn't apparently it doesn't do anything. Yeah, so other than that, you just do it that way. Or you can use explosive expert to use more battle items. But no one uses battle items in NA, so you don't need to do that. He said this is not good because no one knows. No one knows in the party. No one in the party knows that you have more battle items.
개인적인 생각이지만 급속 타격까지는 거의 고정이라고 보는 게 맞는 것 같아요. 이게 무력 수치가 급타가 없으면 좀 많이 안 좋은 편이거든요.
So as he added, thinking about vital point, he thinks vital point is almost mandatory after the three mandatory ones, is because Paladin stagger tends to be a little less, like a little lacking a little bit compared to the other supports and classes, as I mentioned on my stagger video too, right? So taking vital point is going to have him much more of a Giga Chad doing all the mechanics. So, and again, stagger in general is good because if you see Valton, he has that purple bar. That's the giant stagger meter, not the stagger mechanic. The stagger mechanic is an orange meter. The purple one is the more of the purple meter drops, he gets a guaranteed stun for a bit. That's like additional DPS opportunity for you and the party, because sometimes when that purple bar runs out, he gets stunned, right? You're gonna see those kind of stuff a lot. So more stagger you have, that means you have more chance to get the boss to get stunned, right? So stagger is actually not a bad mechanic, like to make sure to increase it for someone like a support, because support's not doing damage, right? So
여기서 이제 하나를 더 추가하면은 심판자. 그래서 이렇게 가는 편이에요, 보통은.
Level 1 judgment, like a go-to build, like a final build for paladins.
이거는 심판자 같은 경우는 데미지 증가라기보다는 순수하게 아덴 수급량, 그러니까 신성검에서 집행자도 아니에요. 이건. 신성검 이거 빛의 분출 쪽에서 생기는 아덴 수급량의 증가를 위해서 사용하는 거거든요. 그래서 무리해서 맞출 필요는 없어요.
So you don't really need to focus on getting that level 1 judgment, but they have level 1 judgment is because you don't have any other level 1s to level, right? So they use that to get just a tiny little bit more identity gauge gain on your holy sword.
진짜 조금이긴 한데 차이가 나긴 하거든요.
It's very small. Very small.
이 차이랑
Oh, he's gonna show you the difference.
이 차이거든요.
Oh, it's like 2 ticks. It's like two and a half ticks.
조금이나마 아덴을 더 빨리 채우기 위해서 아까 처음에 말했던 거랑 똑같은 거예요. 아덴을 빨리 채워야 홀리나이트가 되게 좋아져요.
Because your goal is to turn on your holy blessed aura as much as you can. Yep.
그래서 보통 이제 구슬동자나 급속 타격 같은 경우는 이거는 이제 기믹 스윙용이니까 운영 방법에 대해서 뭐 딱히 없는 것 같고 구슬동자를 사용하게 되면은 이제 구슬이 나오는 거를 봐야죠. 위치를 봐야죠.
Yep. There you go.
이거
The
방어
drops of
구슬이잖아.
ether.
쓰레기잖아 이거.
The shit marble, the shit ether.
이제
Another shit ether.
욕하면 돼 이러면 이제 거지 같네 하면서.
It's so whenever you get the defensive ethers, you always say shit.
이제
Oh, there you go.
나왔다.
Strength ether right here. That's the good stuff.
근데 이게 구슬이 종류가 방어 구슬, 힘의 구슬, 섬광 구슬, 그 다음에 만화 구슬 이렇게 있는데 파티원에게 원하는 구슬을 먹이기가 참 힘들어요. 딜러들이 원하는 건 힘의 구슬이랑 섬광 구슬인데 바람 구슬까지 5개가 있는데 10초 쿨타임이고 30초 버프인가 그래가지고 효과가 되게 괜찮은 편이긴 해요. 근데 이게 문제가 있어. 구슬 동자가 일단
There's a
원하는
problem with-
구슬을 뽑아줘야 된다는 거 파티원에게. 그 다음에 파티원이 구슬을 먹으러 가야 된다는 거. 그리고 구슬이 생성됐는데 나에게 끌어져 와서 먹어진다는 거. 그래서 실질적으로 이 구슬 동자가 제가 게임하면서 느낀 거는 이게 활용도가 그렇게 좋지 않거든요.
So talking about the drops of ether a little bit, right? So technically, drops of ether drops 5 different orbs, and the orbs give you a buff, and you keep dropping orbs when you're at level 3. So the drops of ether buff itself and the cooldown itself is actually pretty good. But the disadvantage of drops of ether is you have to get the right orb because the DPS wants the strength orb and the crit orb. That's all they want, right? And that's 2 out of 5. So not only that you need the right orb, there's also a case where DPS will need to go to the orb to take it, to take the ether, right? Take the ether. And you have another case where the support walks over to the ether by accident and takes it. So there's so many disadvantaged things that drops of ether have, but it is still a good engraving to give a boost of DPS and whatever the buffs that they need for the party. So it's good. And now we're going over to his other engraving that he uses, except other than the drops of ether, which is Magick Stream.
저 같은 경우는 아예 그냥 이제 장착 각인을 다른 걸로 바꿨어요. 구슬 동자를 만화의 흐름이라는 각인으로 바꿔가지고 사람들이 이제 맞으면 저게 효과가 깎여요. 없어져요 스택이. 스택이 없어지면서 쿨타임 그게 없어지거든요. 쿨타임 재사용 대기 시간 감소가 없어져 옵션이 5스택이 되지 않으면. 그래서 스택 유지하기 힘들다고 이제 유료 각인이라고 생각을 안 하시는 분들이 많은데 이거는 그냥 신경 안 쓰고 있다가 스택이 다 찼을 때만 쓰면 된다는 느낌으로 하면 되게 좋은 각인이거든요. 그리고 발동률이 한 6할 정도 돼요, 얘는. 그러니까 구슬 동자보다 밸류가 이쪽이 높다라고 생각을 해서 저는. 그래서 사용을 하고 있고 이게 지금 직접적으로 와닿는 걸 말씀을 드리자면 신속 지금 제가 1818인데 이거 기준으로 각성기 쿨타임이 이제 아무것도 없을 때 단죄 심판 이런 거 없었을 때 91.45초인가 나온대요. 지금 엑셀 계산으로. 좀 근데 마흐가 있으면 마흐만 있는 상태로 76.45로 떨어지거든요. 76.45. 15초 차이 나요. 15초. 마흐가 켜져 있으면. 그래서 이제 마흐로 인해서 땡기는 쿨타임이 15초 정도 이득인 거죠. 각성 쿨이. 그리고 만약에 스택을 유지하게 된다면 계속 그 하변산의 이제 유일한 하변산 각인이거든요. 얘가 지금 마흐가 유지되면 이제 다른 스킬들도 계속 스킬 쿨이 좀 줄어들 있는 상태로 계속 쓸 수 있는 거죠. 그래서 더 많은 스킬을 사용하고 계속 얘기하지만 더 많은 스킬을 사용해서 더 많은 축복의 오라를 켜야 돼.
So his theory on Magick Stream, which I also kind of know, is so when you use Magick Stream, right? What that engraving does is if you don't get hit for a certain amount of time, it gets up to 5 stacks. You see this 5 stack here, And when you don't get hit and then you have the full 5 stacks, you have 10% extra cooldown. And this is additive. It's not multiplicative. Conviction and Judgment used to be additive, but now it's multiplicative, right? This is the only engraving that gives you an additive cooldown bonus. And this difference is huge because if you use the Awakening on without the Magic Stream on, it's about 91.45 seconds if he doesn't have anything with the 1,800 swiftness. If he has Magic Stream on, it goes down to about 76.45, right? That's about as he says, 15-second difference, right? That 15-second difference is huge, right? And at the same time, the more time he doesn't get hit, he can rotate the skills additional 10% more. So if he turns into like an activation, like an efficiency, like if he turns an efficiency into Drops of Ether versus like Magic Stream, right? He thinks Drops of Ether's efficiency is something like 40% of the time that is efficient, is because you got to get the right ether and then you got to have the DPS to walk over it and then take the orb, right? It's like a attributed kind of calculation. But Magic Stream, that I said, I think he activates it maybe like 60% of the time, because what people are saying, like, oh, what if you get hit and like you're not gonna have this buff, like you know. But in this game you have cutscenes too. You have a time where you can just run away and stand still. So the buff, the cooldown buff, is actually lasting longer than you think, right? So therefore, in terms of efficiency, rotating skills more, Magic Stream tends to be a little bit more on the efficiency side, because the faster you rotate your skills, what do? You gain faster, you gain more identity gauge. That means you can activate more Blessed Aura, which is good, right? So that's the Paladin's job. Paladin's job is to activate as many Blessed Auras as possible. He says that his mechanical skill, I think he's good, but he says that mechanical skills isn't as good, so he gets hit often. However, the fact that he still gets hit often, he gets to use the important skills like the Awakening skill or the major buff skills or the shield skill when Magic Stream is turned on, is because, as I said before, there are some cutscenes and Lostark's mechanic is really long. Like, you see a lot of cutscenes sometimes. The boss jumps up and like jumps somewhere else before he does a normal pattern. You get the stacks back before when you're timed to use your buff. So it was actually, after just using it, period, it was better than he thought. Yeah, but it's always preference. Some people play it this way, some people play it that way. So let's so instead of the Hanumatan solo, let's have like a party going and then kill Hanumatan, so that we can explain like the playstyles and stuff.
야, 저기 저 양반 저건데.
뭐요?
이거 얘가 DPS 팔라딘이거든요. 얘 데려갈까요?
Oh shit, DPS Paladin. He has a
예.
DPS Paladin friend. DPS Paladin. Hey, look, crit swiftness. Nice. Turn on that Blessed Aura immediately. Rotating the buffs. So look at that buff's cooldown. It's only 13 seconds.
잘못 눌렀어. 괜찮아요. 홀리나이트 한 명 더 있으니까.
So landing the Awakening and then filling up turning on the second Blessed Aura. Look at that. This is why Paladin is much easier. It's like a much easier support when it goes to the late game, because you're just gonna have Blessed Aura like almost like very, very often. That would be like a later game. So after he's done, what he does is he just rotates the buff, right? Rotates the buff, provides shields, use skills whenever he can. The marking skill, which is a Q skill, right? And then he provided the shields accordingly, and rotating the attack buffs to keep it up 100% of the time. So if you look at here, he has 5 stacks of Magic Stream. So whenever he uses a skill, it's only 14 seconds for the shield. Right, dodging these first, right? And then, since he still has a stack, by the way, so when he does it, it's only 9 seconds. 9 seconds on that buff, the Judgment. Wrath of God, right? And then if he uses Heavenly Blessings afterwards, so he uses Wrath of God again, which is 9 seconds. And then afterwards, if he thinks he wants to activate his holy blessings again, he can just do that. But he can also take Awakening Pot, right? To cover it up too, right? So he got hit twice, so he has the stacks ran out, but still, since he has high swiftness, it went from about 9 seconds to 12 seconds on his Wrath of God, right? But even his so even if his Wrath of God up, he can still rotate the attack buffs very easily. So he uses Awakening here so that he keeps a lot of HP up, and then he turns the Blessed Aura again. So every time the Blessed Aura is up, that's an additional 10% damage to everyone. And it just gives you a DOT heal too. It's very good. That's why Paladin is a party for someone that everyone plays really well. Because like it's very efficient in terms of attack buff and attack buffs and shields and stuff.
아 맞다. 팔라딘 진짜 큰 장점 하나 있어요.
뭐요?
한 손으로도 게임 가능함. 해봤어.
So the biggest advantage of Paladin is you can play with one hand. Oh, this is my friend that plays with one hand. He beat Broshaze with us with one hand. Because he had a cast on his left hand. Oh shit! Wait, hold up. We gotta see the Chaos Dungeon. We gotta see the Chaos Dungeon run. Because he wanted to show you the Chaos Dungeon.
카든 돌아도 돼요?
네, 한번 돌아줘. 얼마나 잘 돌길래 한번 봅시다.
나 진짜 기깔나게 도는데 카든 전문가임.
He said he's super fast in Chaos Dungeon. He wants to show it to you. He wants to show it to you.
바뀌었나 근데 세트 이거 버그 있다던데. 됐다.
Nice. He has the.
나 이거 쓴다고.
Oh shit! Hey, that looks fun as hell, dude. Oh shit! Wow! A full Chaos Dungeon build, man. Well, he just died in one hit. What the hell? Holy shit, look at this Chaos Dungeon, dude. He just slashes him. It's the best Chaos Dungeon player ever, dude. He needed to do it. Bruh. Boom. Dead. Holy shit, it's actually pretty fast. Looks like a DPS class doing Chaos Dungeon.
빠르긴 빠름. 엄청 빠른 건
guys,
아니고
this is the very end Chaos Dungeon, the 1560 Chaos Dungeon. It's almost twice as faster than me.
Good.
빌드 좀 보여줘봐요. We can take questions while this. Oh.
카우스 던전?
Wow! 3 5s out of 1 Chaos Dungeon build. No wonder he's fast. Preemptive Strike, Contender, Curse Doll, Raid Captain, Keen Blunt, Level 1 Judgment. So that's good, man. So this covers the interview. It ended a little bit earlier than Foss's one. Foss's interview was the longest. So to cover, let's ask the 마무리로 하실 말씀 있나요?
홀리나이트 되게 좋은 직업이라서 서포터로 픽하면은 좀 편하게 컨텐츠를 다 즐길 수 있지 않을까. 근데 이제 서포터 특성상 1인 컨텐츠 이제 카오스 던전은 제외하고 카던은 되게 잘 돌거든요, 홀리나이트가. 근데 이제 타워랑 그 약간 좀 자질구리한 그 컨텐츠들 있잖아요, 막 이런 보스러시, 뭐 권자의 길 이런 게 좀 힘들어요. 그래서 거기서 줄 수 있는 골드가 있는데, 그러니까 먹을 수 있는 골드가 있는데 그런 걸 서포터를 본캐를 하고 있으면 좀 얻기가 힘들다 정도.
So, maining Paladin is a little tougher in the single content. Like, the you guys know towers and boss rushes, right? They're very bad. And the Chaos Bridge, those kind of stuff. Other than that stuff, if you have a Paladin, I think Paladin's one of the best support to enjoy every single content that Lostark provides. And even until the very end game, which is still now in Korea. Like, we're still looking for supports and we still look for Paladin. So, if you have a Paladin, it is very good till the very end. Like it's just never been bad. Supports has never been bad in this game, and it will never be like cut it out. So if you ever have an interest in playing a support, is Paladin is pretty good. Yeah. Cool. That's good.
Good.
All right. As always, guys, we're gonna have some more interviews in the future, maybe, hopefully. Good thing we had one today. Maybe in the future we'll have other classes, but it is really up to me to get some of the friends to actually decide to share some opinions with us. It's kind of hard because not that many people want to share their stuff because they get a little shy sometimes. But as always, you guys are behaving, which is very well, very very good. So in the future, I'll probably bring some more people. You guys wanted to see Paladin, so I introduced my Paladin friends to you guys. And other than that, that's good. So, all right, thanks guys. Bye YouTube.
Bye YouTube.
Bye YouTube. Say thanks to our friend Magol, please.